Imagine this for a second. A courtroom, right? But the year is 897 AD. And the accused, it's not a person you can, question. It's a decomposing corpse. And not just any corpse. This one is decked out in the full sacred robes of a pope. Seriously, this isn't some gothic horror story.
No, it really happened.
It's the cadaver senate. Pope Stephen VI putting his dead predecessor, Formosus, on trial.
Well, it's wild, but it's also, it's maybe the most bizarre example, but it's just one instance, really, one point in this, 2,000-year history where the Catholic Church faced these spectacular moral crises. It really sets a scene.
It absolutely does. And welcome, everyone.
And today's deep dive comes straight from a question in our source material, a book called Scandal and Survival, A History of Church Corruption. And the question is blunt. How corrupt was the Catholic Church? Our source, it doesn't hold back. It talks about times when popes, cardinals, the whole Vatican administration, the Curia acted, frankly, more like warlords or maybe Renaissance gangsters than spiritual guides.
So our mission today, for you listening, is to unpack some of the most, let's say, lurid but well-documented cases. We'll group them by the type of abuse, move chronologically.
Exactly. And it's not just for shock value, right? It's about seeing the patterns, these deep-seated patterns of, moral failure and understanding the huge impact this history had.
On the church and really on the world. Okay, let's dive in.
Let's do it.
So to really get a handle on the scale of this, let's start where our source points first, one of the most consistent, almost foundational patterns.
Yeah.
Just the brazen selling of sacred things, church offices, even divine favor. Where do we even begin with that?
We begin with simony. That's the actual term for, buying or selling spiritual jobs or holy items. And our sources show this was just rampant. We're talking 9th century right through to the 16th.
Wow, centuries.
Oh, yeah. Bishoprics, abbacies heading a monastery, even the Pope's job itself, the papal tiara, openly auctioned. It wasn't about who was holiest. It was about who had the cash or the connections. Power plays.
And we're not talking about minor figures swept under the rug.
Yeah.
Our source points out Dante, right? In the Inferno,
right.
He puts Pope Nicholas III, this is late 1200s, where eighth circle of hell.
That's right.
Describes him stuffed upside down in a fiery baptismal font, specifically for selling church offices like a street vendor. I mean, that's a powerful image. Shows you how people felt about it even then.
It really does, and it shows how the institution meant to be the moral compass sometimes became the source of its own ethical problems. Selling spiritual authority like that, it just, opened the door for all sorts of other abuses, blurred the lines completely.
Okay, so selling offices was one thing, but then our sources hit us with something from 1476, Pope Sixtus IV. He apparently charged priests an annual mistress fee. That sounds made up.
It sounds unbelievable, but it happened. And the hypocrisy, as our source makes very clear, is just staggering. Sixtus IV himself, known to have mistresses, fathered illegitimate kids.
Seriously?
Oh, yeah. And he famously stacked the church with his nephews, giving them lucrative posts, benefits, basically enriching his own family using church funds. So taxing priests for their mistresses while doing the same or worse.
It's beyond hypocritical.
It's a total perversion of authority. By taxing immorality, he basically sanctioned it, turned sin into a revenue stream. Imagine the damage to the church's credibility across Europe.
Okay, moving into the 1500s, the 16th century, the money pressure on the popes seems to peak with one of the most infamous episodes, what our source calls Tessel's indulgent circus. What was Pope Leo X trying to fund, and how did this, circus unfold?
Leo X needed serious cash, mainly for building the new massive St. Peter's Basilica in Rome.
Right.
So our source explains Archbishop Albert of Mainz set up this huge campaign to sell plenary indulgences.
What exactly were those again?
They were basically certificates, official pardons, promising to slash your time in purgatory or even get you out completely. For a price, of course.
The price.
Right. And he hired this guy, Johann Tetzel, who was apparently a master salesman, to flog these things across Germany. And the slogan Tetzel used, it was chillingly effective. As soon as the coin in the coffer rings, the soul from purgatory springs.
Wow. Talk about sales pitch. Appealing directly to people's deepest fears about salvation.
Exactly. Pure manipulation.
So this sounds like a real flashpoint.
Yeah.
But our source says it wasn't just about the money raised, right?
Yeah.
What were the immediate consequences?
Oh, the consequences were enormous. Far bigger than just funding St. Peter's. This blatant selling of salvation, this commercialization of grace. It directly provoked Martin Luther.
Ah, Luther.
He posts his 95 Theses in 1517, and boom, that's the spark that lights the Protestant Reformation. So, yeah, selling indulgences might have indirectly paid for some Michelangelo masterpieces.
Right, there's that irony.
But it also caused this huge financial drain on the church long term as millions left. And more profoundly, it permanently broke Western Christianity apart, a schism the church never fully recovered from. Shows how chasing wealth completely undermined their spiritual authority.
Astonishing. Okay, so financial corruption is one thing. But then our sources take us somewhere even darker, revealing this, frankly, shocking history of sexual misconduct, illegitimacy, right at the very top. Yeah. The hierarchy itself. Edward, what's the standout example from this era people call the pornocracy?
Yeah, the pornocracy. It's a term historians used for the early 10th century when powerful aristocratic women basically controlled papal appointments. Our source details how it really kicks off around 904 with Pope Sergius III.
What did he do?
Well, first, he seized the papacy by force. Then he apparently had his two rivals who were imprisoned, strangled.
Okay, so violence right from the start.
Exactly. And then he takes a 15-year-old noblewoman, Marozia, as his mistress.
15. And here's the kicker, right? Their son, their illegitimate son, later becomes Pope John XI.
That's the fact. The only known illegitimate son of a pope to actually become pope himself.
What does that even say about the papacy then? The whole moral climate?
It says it was an absolute shambles, doesn't it? The papacy was just tangled up with these powerful Roman families. The highest spiritual job in Christendom became a political prize, traded among factions, celibacy, basic morality, just, completely out the window at the very top, eroded any public trust.
Okay, jump forward about 500 years, 1492. We get Pope Alexander VI, the Borgia Pope.
Ah, the Borgias. Infamous.
And he openly acknowledged having, 5 kids? By 2 different mistresses, just out in the open?
Zero shame. And the scandals didn't end there. Our source describes this notorious banquet of the chestnuts held in the Apostolic Palace, the Pope's residence.
What happened there?
Get this. Cardinals, courtesans, and apparently chestnuts scattered on the floor, then a naked race with papal offices dangled as prizes for the winners.
You're kidding. In the Vatican.
Witnessed by high-ranking church officials. It wasn't just private sin. It was a public spectacle of debauchery, a total inversion of values, where sin wasn't just tolerated, it was like part of the entertainment.
Unbelievable. Okay, then a bit later, 1550s. Pope Julius III. Our sources mention he adopted a 14-year-old beggar boy. That sounds odd.
It was more than odd. He didn't just adopt him. He made the boy a cardinal. Gave him apartments right there in the papal palace.
A cardinal. A teenager off the street.
Yep. And Roman gossip, as the source notes, immediately nicknamed him the cardinal concubine. Tells you what people assumed was going on.
I bet.
And the story gets worse. After Julius died, this young man, now a cardinal, murdered 2 men in a tavern brawl. And the Curia, the Vatican administration, had to hide him away.
So a cardinal committing murder and getting protected?
It just sums up the lawlessness, the moral vacuum. Power and connections meant you could literally get away with murder, even if you wore a cardinal's hat.
It really sounds like the lines between, holy life and just pure hedonism were completely gone for some people.
Yeah.
Boccaccio, the Renaissance writer, apparently joked about Roman convents being high-class brothels.
Yeah, suggesting it was pretty widespread knowledge, or at least perception.
Yeah.
And Martin Luther, never one to hold back.
No.
Our source quotes his staving line, "The cardinals' colleges are nothing but public whorehouses." Now, that's harsh polemics, but it shows how widespread the perception of this kind of decay was. Not just isolated incidents, but something people saw as systemic.
Right. Okay, this next category, it really makes you question the whole idea of spiritual authority. We're talking outright violence, revenge, political games played with, deadly stakes, sanctions from the top.
And this brings us right back to where we started, that really shocking intro detail. The Cadaver Synod, 897 AD.
Yeah, let's unpack that again. Pope Stephen VI hated his predecessor, Formosus.
Hated him, driven by politics and power. So he literally digs up Formosus's rotting corpse.
And that's after he died, right?
Something like that. Puts the papal robes back on the corpse, props it up on a throne, and puts it on trial.
It's just grotesque. A deacon had to stand there and answer for the corpse.
Can you imagine? And surprise, surprise, the corpse was found guilty of perjury, violating canon law, things like that.
And the punishment.
They stripped the body, cut off the fingers he used for blessings, and then threw the corpse into the Tiber River.
What does an act like that even signify? About power, justice, anything?
It signifies that political hatred ran so deep it extended beyond the grave. It wasn't about justice, it was pure symbolic revenge, trying to erase his enemy's legitimacy completely.
Just brutal.
And the grim punchline. Our source notes that Pope Stephen himself didn't last long. He was later overthrown, imprisoned, and strangled.
Karma, maybe?
Or just the brutal reality of power politics in that era, even within the church leadership. Violent ends were common.
Okay, fast forward again, 1478. Pope Sixtus IV pops up again, this time involved in the Patsy conspiracy. This was basically a hit job, wasn't it, with papal approval?
Tacit approval, yes. Our source explains Sixtus essentially gave the green light for assassins to attack Lorenzo de' Medici, the ruler of Florence, Lorenzo the Magnificent inside Florence Cathedral, during Mass.
During Mass. At the altar.
Giuliano de' Medici, Lorenzo's brother, was stabbed to death right there. Lorenzo escaped, wounded. It was sacrilege combined with political assassination, quietly okayed by the Pope.
And the aftermath was just as brazen, right? Florence fought back against the conspirators.
Naturally. They executed some, including an archbishop involved.
And Sixtus's response. He puts the entire city of Florence under interdict.
Which basically meant banning all public church services. No mass, no baptisms, no last rites. A massive spiritual punishment for the whole city.
Using faith as a weapon for political revenge. Astonishing abuse of power.
Absolutely. Leveraging the church's spiritual tools for purely worldly, violent goals. It showed how far some popes would go, sacrificing the spiritual welfare of thousands for their own agenda. Alienated a lot of people.
Okay, so beyond the really dramatic, lurid stuff, corpse trials, orgies, assassinations, our sources also point to more systemic failures, maybe less sensational, but things that really hit the everyday spiritual lives of ordinary people.
That's a crucial point. In the 15th century, for example, our source describes this thing called pluralism, which sounds boring, but was devastating. You'd have one guy, maybe a cardinal or bishop, holding multiple dioceses at the same time.
Like being bishop of 6 different cities.
Exactly, sometimes more. And they'd collect the income, the stipends from all of them, but they'd never actually go there, never set foot in those dioceses. They were just diocese collectors.
So who was looking after the people in those places?
Often nobody properly. Maybe a poorly paid vicar. The source puts it starkly. Parishioners spiritually perish for lack of true shepherds. No guidance, no teaching, no sacrament sometimes. Just abandonment, really, while the guy at the top got rich.
That's quietly devastating, isn't it?
It is. It highlights this huge gap between the church's supposed mission and the reality on the ground, all because of greed and neglect at the leadership level.
And then there's the issue of priests just not knowing anything. Clerical illiteracy.
Oh, yeah. By the 16th century, particularly in places like England, church inspections visitations found priests who literally couldn't recite the Lord's Prayer in Latin.
Couldn't recite the Lord's Prayer.
Or couldn't name the 4 Gospels. Basic stuff.
How does that even happen? How do you get priests who are that ignorant of their own faith?
Well, again, it goes back to simony and patronage. Many got their positions because they bought them or because a powerful relative appointed them, not because they had studied theology or felt a spiritual calling. Standards just collapsed.
And that leads to that famous quote from William Tyndale, the Bible translator.
Exactly. His incredibly sharp jibe. A boy that driveth the plow shall know more of the scripture than the Pope. And our source stresses, for many ordinary people back then, that wasn't just rhetoric, it was literally true. Their supposed spiritual leaders often knew less than they did, caused huge disillusionment.
Right. Okay, so connecting all this history, this long, sometimes horrifying pattern, to our own times, our sources are very clear. The corruption didn't just stop in the Renaissance. We have to talk about the global sex abuse crisis of the 20th and 21st centuries.
Yes, and the scale of this modern crisis is just immense, truly disturbing. We're looking at thousands upon thousands of priests worldwide, either convicted or credibly accused of sexually abusing minors.
Thousands.
And beyond the individual abusers, the sources detail how secret archives in diocese after diocese show bishops actively covering it up, shuffling known predators from one parish to another, letting the abuse continue, sometimes for decades.
And it went right to the top, didn't it? The source mentions Cardinal George Pell from Australia. He was the Vatican treasurer, number 3 guy, effectively.
That's right. He became the highest-ranking church official ever jailed in relation to abuse charges. Now, his conviction was later overturned by Australia's High Court, but the fact that accusations reached that level showed how pervasive this was.
Yeah.
And investigations, like the government reports in Ireland, found undeniable evidence of systematic concealment going back to the 1940s, maybe earlier. It wasn't just a few bad apples, it was an institutional culture of protecting the church's reputation over protecting children. A deeply ingrained pattern.
And those reports from the U.S., like the Pennsylvania grand jury report in 2018, they use that phrase, weaponized faith.
A chilling phrase.
Describing how priests and bishops use their spiritual authority, the trust people place in them, not just to commit abuse, but to groom victims, to silence them, to manipulate families, twisting faith itself into a tool of abuse and cover-up.
And what's fascinating here, or maybe deeply troubling, is how this modern crisis connects back to those historical patterns we've been talking about.
How so?
It's that same toxic mix, immense spiritual authority, which commands obedience and trust, combined with often significant institutional wealth and power, but crucially, lacking transparent external accountability. Whether it's selling offices in the 10th century or covering up abuse in the 20th, that combination consistently creates the conditions for profound moral failure. The specifics change, but the underlying vulnerability, that lack of real oversight, seems constant.
So after diving this deep into centuries of scandal and corruption, what does it all mean for us today? What's the lasting impact?
Well, our source points to several key long-term effects. First, a huge loss of moral capital for the church. Every major scandal wave, the simony, indulgences, the Borgia era, and now the abuse crisis, didn't just happen in a vacuum. Each one fueled major reform movements.
Right, you mentioned some earlier.
Yeah, the Cluniac reforms tried to clean up the papacy in the 10th century. The Franciscans reacted against wealth. The Protestant Reformation was a direct response to corruption. The Enlightenment challenged religious authority. And now, modern secular investigations are forcing change. Scandal breeds reform, eventually.
Okay, what else?
Second, a massive financial cost. Billions have been paid out in settlements just for the recent abuse crisis, and it's ongoing. And think back to the indulgences. Yes, they helped build St. Peter's, but they also triggered the Reformation, which was a permanent financial and spiritual blow, costing the church millions of followers in vast territories. Corruption has always had a steep price tag.
And has it led to actual changes within the church itself, in its laws?
Yes, significant changes to canon law, but often dragged out kicking and screaming. Things like mandatory psychological screening for seminary candidates, creating a Vatican financial watchdog agency, establishing zero-tolerance policies for abuse. Our source is clear. None of that would likely have happened without massive public outrage and external pressure forcing the institution's hand.
So it circles back to that core insight from the source material.
Exactly. Immense spiritual authority plus immense wealth minus external accountability equals spectacular corruption. It's like a recurring formula throughout history.
It's a stark lesson.
And yet, the church has survived every single one of these crises, often by eventually adopting the very reforms it initially resisted or even persecuted.
That's true. It's still here.
Which leads to a provocative thought for you, the listener. How do these shockwaves from history continue to shape not just Christianity, but also our secular laws and ideas about accountability today? And what does this enduring pattern, scandal, outrage, forced reform, survival tell us about any powerful institution, religious or secular, when it faces challenges of oversight and the corrupting potential of its own power?
Something definitely worth thinking about. Well, that brings us to the end of this deep dive. Thank you so much for joining us.
Always a pleasure.
If you found this exploration valuable, please do like, subscribe, and you can always visit us at www.dansplain.xyz for our latest articles, other deep dives, products, and more.
Let's check it out.
We'll catch you on the next.